evening. Electricorp wheeled out the big guns today for a long-awaited press conference designed to dispel doubts about the future of the Clyde Dam. A big contingent of media people braved chilly early morning temperatures at Clyde to hear firsthand from the experts on the job. For months there's been speculation about when the billion-dollar dam will be filled and the potential danger from slips in the gorge upstream from the dam. The journalists were told 11,000 hectares of slips have now been identified. A new geological report is due out in October, and it's still likely the dam will be filled next year. The experts were adamant that the dam would be safe, but the cost of the extra earth-moving work and the tunnels into the suspect areas remains an unanswered question. Now, the government's asset sales program. It sold its first irrigation scheme, and it's in our region. The farmers of the Lower Waitaki paid just under $1 million for the scheme, which provides water to 16,000 hectares. The government's share of the building cost was $9 million. The 190 users of the scheme are happy with the deal and have formed a company to run it. Another 45 irrigation schemes are for sale around the country. The Dunedin butcher, whose operation was closed by the City Health Department, must clean up his premises by tomorrow or lose the remainder of the meat stored there. It's the second time the Health Department's closed down his operation. The first time was in January, when health officers found he was operating in grossly unsanitary conditions. Kathy Graham reports.
When the Health Department closed down the butchery in Elgin Road, Mornington 6 months ago, they thought that was the end of the problem, but it wasn't. The owner started operating again, processing carcasses for private customers in conditions as bad or worse than before.
It was pretty bad. It's probably the worst I've seen in my 23 years as a health officer.
What sort of scene were you confronted with when you walked in?
Well, there was meat which was hanging in the open that had been there for several weeks. From its condition, it was dehydrated and mould covered. And in the cool rooms, one of the cool rooms, there was a similar situation with complete breakdown of storage and hygiene, obvious. And generally right throughout the whole of the premises, yards, it was a shambles, a mess.
Mr. Early says it's hard to trace specific illnesses to meat from the premises. Some was processed and sold through a retail outlet, and the Health Department's considering prosecuting that business. As for the butcher, he's already lost thousands of dollars worth of meat that's been seized by the Health Department and turned into fertiliser.
A Dunedin schoolboy has won a bronze medal at the International Mathematical Olympiad in Germany. Stuart Folds of Otago Boys High was the highest scoring member of the 6-strong New Zealand team. Although unplaced, the team showed a big improvement on its performance a year ago. We must be a sweet nation. Of the nearly 10,000 tonnes of honey produced here each year, we consume 6,000 ourselves. With consumption like that and an increase in price, it's no wonder that after recent hard times in the honey industry, New Zealand beekeepers are quietly confident about the future. Carolyn Harper caught up with the price of honey.
Every year, each one of us consumes 1 3/4 kilos of honey. 12 months ago, this would have cost us $3.50. Today, this costs us $7.50. In 12 months, there's been a complete turnaround in the honey industry. Honey's made a comeback, and it's now at the price it was 2 years ago. Internationally, there was a glut of honey, and so the price was low. But in the past year, the US has slowed the subsidising of its own honey producers. In China, a leading producer has been found to put a contaminant in its honey. So the glut's vanished, the international price has risen, and so too has New Zealand's. However, New Zealand beekeepers aren't making huge profits.
In fact, it's only really at this level at the moment at a point of making production worthwhile.
Like the farmers in Canterbury and North Otago, beekeepers have been particularly hard hit by the drought. Not only is honey production down this year, but hives in these areas won't be as well prepared for next year.
The major problem at any time of the year, any year rather, for beekeepers is climate. It's our number one factor, and it's something we can't do anything much about. This past year was a good example. We had extremes of wet and dry, particularly dry in the east coast regions, and a lot of beekeepers there had virtually no crop whatsoever.
And another problem, brought about by user pays, is that the DSIR now charges beekeepers for information. But despite those concerns, the feeling at the National Beekeeping Conference is positive.
Overall, people are quietly confident, providing they can survive the next few months into the new season, of a better future ahead. That's not to say we haven't got to work pretty hard to make sure that it stays that way.
Beekeepers have every reason to be optimistic. New Zealanders like Winnie the Pooh love their honey.
A 33-year-old Dunedin sales representative who pleaded guilty to using his employer's chequebook for financial gain was sentenced in the Dunedin court today. Mervyn Charles Chave wrote cheques totalling $252,000 while supervisor of the Savings and Loans Department of the PSIS in Dunedin. The court was told all the money has since been paid back. Judge Everett sentenced him to 190 hours community service. Wood carving is usually done with a chisel, and it's an art which is totally time-consuming. However, Ken Nicholson found a wood carver with a difference, a sportsman who does things rough and ready.
When you watch the sport of bushcraft, you think the contestants have about as much artistic ability as the superstars of wrestling. But not so Rotorua axeman Jim Wass, who mixes some of the more basic forms of bushcraft with, believe it or not, wood sculptures.
I've worked in the bush all my life, and I've been log carving for the last 10 years.
Well, I've got a pretty solid hunk of wood here. What are you going to turn this into?
I hope to make it into a log cabin.
Bit of art from the bush, I've got to see this.
Yeah, a bit of bush art.
Jim Wass is no slug with an axe as well as a chainsaw. His 7 world titles include 2 standing block and 2 underhand titles in the States. And as Jim puts it, he's got a suitcase full of national titles. The old dog will sit outside the log cabin pretty well. What are you going to call it, Jim?
Oh, I'm going to call him Solo, just like the penguin.
Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, what's the problem? Got toothache.
Oh, I could fix that. Sit down there. Which one is it?
Up the back, Jim, up the back.
It was a bought one. We'll be back tomorrow. Good night.